Hello and welcome everyone to this PGA conversation with the creative team behind Dexter. Joining us today is writer and executive producer Clyde Phillips and actor and executive producer Michael C. Hall. Before we get started, I would love to say a quick thank you to all of our friends at Showtime for making this conversation today possible. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator today, Jenelle Riley. Jenelle is the Deputy Awards and Film Editor at Variety, and she is a three-time Emmy winner for her work on PBS's Actors on Actors. Thank you all so much for being here, and Jenelle, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited because I'm sure many people feel this way, that they sort of willed this show into existence because we've been asking and begging. And so as much as I would like to believe that it was all my tweets that are responsible for Dexter's return, I'm sure that's probably not the case. But before we get started, I love to go back to the beginning whenever I have people as accomplished as either of you, and just ask, what was your first job in this business? The first time you felt you could call yourself a writer or a producer, the first time you felt like a professional actor? And let's start with Michael.
Well, I mean, you know, there were jobs here and there that I did, but the first one that felt official and felt like it accompanied my having gotten out of school was right after I graduated from NYU, the graduate acting program in 1996. My first job was as essentially a spear carrier. I played Warwick in the theater in the Central Park, Shakespeare in the Park.
Shakespeare in the Park.
Production of Henry V.
No way.
Starring Andre Braugher, and I understudied Henry. And you know, there was no chance. I mean, I think if Andre Braugher wasn't able to go on, they would have just canceled it. But I did learn it and rehearse it during the hot afternoons. So that was my first job out of school was at the New York Shakespeare Festival.
That's pretty impressive. Most people say they did a McDonald's commercial or something, but I mean, Shakespeare in the Park, that's not bad.
Yeah. Mostly just standing still in the park, but still.
But still, Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Standing still in Shakespeare is better than standing still in, you know, an industrial, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Clyde, what about for you?
Well, my first job was while I was still in school. I was in graduate school. I was teaching in graduate school, and summertime came around, and young college teachers don't get to teach summertime because it's so easy that the older professors take it. And I needed a job. And if you live in New York, you wait tables. If you live in LA, which I was at the time, you go on a game show. So I went on a game show, ended up winning for 2 days, and then ended up getting a job writing questions for the game show.
No.
So I was suddenly getting paid to write, which I had never done before. It's a couple $100s a week, but I just had a blast. And like all shows I'm on, it got canceled. And but I had my little toe in the door, so I met other assistants and other young writers, and ended up getting a job working for the people who were the kings of the television movies back in those days: Rick Rosenberg and Bob Christensen, Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, Queen of the Stardust Ballroom. I was a kid I was a PA on Queen of the Stardust Ballroom, and then worked my way up the ladder through them, and they taught me the business.
Are you allowed to say the name of the game show you worked on?
Sure. It was called Split Second with Tom Kennedy. And it was a question and answer show, and he'd say, "Look at the board," and then there would be 3 answers. And I lost. I was a literature major, and I was in literature grad school, and I lost to a cab driver on a Daphne du Maurier question.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Who knew she wrote the Rebecca? I don't know. You know.
You didn't know she wrote Rebecca? Isn't that like her main thing?
Well, the cab driver got in before me, so.
Oh, I see. Okay, it wasn't just faster.
It was
just faster. Yeah. No, I so related when you said that, because when I first moved to LA, I did a number of game shows as well, but I don't think I fared as well as you did. Definitely nobody offered me a job afterwards. Well, as I said before, people have been hoping, praying, chanting for Dexter to come back, but you did tie it up so beautifully, 8 years ago. I'm sure there were every once in a while somebody brought up the idea or maybe floated it, but what made you decide that now was the time? And, was it the story that came to you, or did you just sort of think like, I want to know what this guy's up to?
Michael, you want to take that?
That's actually for
Well, first-
Clyde.
Yeah.
For me,
go ahead.
I didn't understand. Okay. There had been various iterations of attempts at it. Michael would be interviewed about Safe or about playing John Kennedy in The Crown, and always a Dexter question would come up, and he would say, "Never say never." And then the minute I would see that, I would write to him or call him, and he says, "I just kind of had to say that, or we're not ready." And then there was a script written by one of the Dexter writers that both Showtime and Michael didn't go for. And then there were some there was a room of playwrights that had gotten together and started banging away at it, but it sort of drifted away from a show that Michael wanted to do. And Michael and I stayed in contact all these years. And then one day, about 2.5 years ago, believe it or not, it was July 1st. I'm on Martha's Vineyard, and Gary Levine, the president of Showtime, calls and says, "Do you want to come to New York?" And I'm coming to New York. Do you want to have lunch? And I said, "Gary, you've got 2 daughters who live in New York. You don't want to have lunch with me. You want to have lunch with them. So this is," and he's a dear old friend. "If you want to talk business, let's talk." And he says, "It's about Dexter. Michael's ready. And are you interested?" And Michael's finally ready. Are you interested? And I said, "Are you kidding?" And I got on a plane a week later, went to see Michael at his apartment in the city, and pitched him an approach to doing the show. And within a half hour, Michael said, "I get it. I love it. I'm in." And then this all took place in one day. And then in the car going back to the airport to Martha's Vineyard, and I called Gary Levine, president of the network, very busy guy. And he snatched up the phone and said, "Well," and I said, "Michael's in." And Gary said, "Go hire a writing room." So it wasn't like a development thing. It wasn't like, let's see what the pilot looks like. Because Michael was ready and Michael was interested in what we usually wanted to do, we knew we had a show.
I mean, I'm a big believer in things happening when they're meant to. But Michael, as an actor who, created such an indelible role and was so beloved for it, was it kind of hard to say no those other times? And was it really just a matter of waiting for this story?
Ultimately, it wasn't hard to say no because, I appreciate the way you characterize the end of the series proper as having wrapped up beautifully. But the fact is, it was very dissatisfying for a lot of people, in as much as it was, if nothing else, open-ended and inconclusive. And I never wanted to go back to the show unless I felt like it was really a story worth telling. I didn't want to come back and do something that was pretty good. I wanted it to be great. And it was only when Clyde, in the room right over there, as he said, in this apartment, came and sort of gave me the broad strokes for what he envisioned for the reboot, that I just intuitively felt like, yeah, this is it. And while we had gone down many different roads, or several different roads, some further than others, over the years, it was only this one that felt right. And in hindsight, I think it had to be Clyde at the head of the writer's table, or steering the ship, or whatever, however you want to describe it. I think Clyde brought back to the show the just intuitive sense of the fundamentals of its DNA. We were doing something very different contextually, the characters in a very different place, but there needed to be something that made it feel like it cohered to what we left behind. And that's, among other things, what he was able to ensure we would do. And it was that confidence that I think allowed me to take the leap.
Well, I really like the finale because I do not want everything wrapped up in a bow for Dexter. I need
Nice.
to believe that there are so many ways this story could go. But I actually wonder, as an actor, do you ever think about your characters? Like wonder what they're doing now? Did you think about Dexter much over, or was it, out of your mind kind of?
I didn't. I mean, I thought more about, where the show could go were we to turn the cameras back on, as far as what he was up to at any given moment. I didn't until we decided to do this. And then I started to think about what his life had been like, which was a useful exercise as we got ready to go back into this. But yeah, I put him away. I said goodbye, but I also, I wasn't saying goodbye to someone in a casket. I mean, he was still out there alive. I didn't know if I would ever intersect with him again, but I'm glad on the other side of having shot it that I did.
Michael, when you walk down the street or in public, the first thing out of any stranger or fan's mouth is Dexter, isn't it?
I mean, sometimes they'll actually say Michael. Sometimes they'll say David Fisher.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I mean, the very, very small percentage of people will, mention something else, which is always kind of miraculous to me. But for the most part, yeah. I mean, if I go outside, I'm an ambassador.
So did you do this show just so people would stop asking, basically?
If there was a pie chart that broke down my motivation, it might be a very, very small slice of it. I don't know if I answered that question anymore.
I'm actually delighted Clyde asked you that, because this is embarrassing to admit, but a friend of mine called you Hedwig. Thought that we ran into you on the streets of New York and they went, Hedwig. And I was like, that's not his name, but you were so gracious. And I think you actually seemed a little pleased that it wasn't
I was like,
Dexter or David.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, on another note, that was a great show too. So I'm not surprised they remembered you from it. Something I really think that Dexter New Blood does that I think you have to do if you do a reboot or a continuation. It is its own entity. It's its own thing, but it has the spirit or the DNA of the original. And I'm really curious if going into the writing of it, going into the making of it, you had those discussions about we don't want to necessarily copy, the dynamic of where Dexter worked before. I mean, this is entirely new life. Things you wanted to do or things you wanted to stay away from?
Well, we wanted to acknowledge that the time had passed. We didn't want to, one thing that Michael and I both always say is this is not Dexter season 9. Almost a decade has passed, and we wanted to respect the audience enough to not say, hey, let's pretend that the end of season 8 didn't happen. And also, there is the lineage, the legacy of the show that is alive, very much alive in the new show, in New Blood. But New Blood stands on its own as well. And we worked very hard at, not everybody in the world has seen Dexter. Almost everybody has. But there's a whole generation of people who have not. And we wanted to attract them as well. And we deal with a lot of, look, it's about Dexter and his dark passenger and his struggle and his conscience, and who's embodied by Jennifer Carpenter. But there's also, we wanted to be a modern show. We wanted to be a modern anti-hero show without being lumped into the old anti-hero shows of Sopranos and The Wire and The Shield and the Breaking Bad. And so we deal with school bullying, school shooting, climate change, opioid crisis. We're keeping up with the times. And also, we brought back Marcos Siega, our favorite director and our mutual dear friend, to be the executive producer and main director. And he directed 6 of the 10 episodes. And he gave it a very filmic look. There's a thing called aspect ratio that looks like this. And we got permission from Showtime to shoot this like a movie. And because all the scripts were written, which is kind of good news, bad news, we ended up shooting 119 days in a row during COVID, chasing snow, and it was basically a 10-hour movie shot in 6 months.
Wow. And Michael, I'm sure you probably addressed this a lot in the original run, but is it difficult to be this character, to be in that headspace for an extended period of time? Part of me thinks it might be kind of nice because Dexter doesn't really have guilt. So it might be freeing, but as an actor, I have to imagine that's challenging.
I think it's gotten progressively challenging.
Really?
In that, when we first meet him, he's got his killer self, and that's the real person who he keeps hidden from the world, and he's got his simulated life. But those start to bleed into each other, and his appetite for humanity is whetted, and he starts to have real relationships, and his life just essentially gets a lot less controlled and a lot more chaotic and a lot more stressful. And I'm sure Clyde will attest to, like, over the course of shooting the seasons, I would always get progressively like discombobulated and stressed out and stormy as we got to the end of each show. With this one, we weren't sort of shooting it that way, but yeah, I think simulating someone who has this much on his plate is stressful. But there does remain, I mean, even though he is more, the waters are more muddied than they used to be in terms of whether or not he's experiencing authentic human emotion, he is someone who's able to kill someone and get up the next day and go have breakfast. And, his capacity for stress management is pretty off the charts. So I don't know. I think I had, generally speaking, more fun with it, revisiting it.
Yeah.
I had a blast doing Dexter the first time around, but I do think simulating all of it did maybe wear on me a little bit more. It's easy to say on the other side of it, though. I don't know, but it's probably other people better to answer than me.
It's interesting because I would have thought it would have gotten easier to, come in and out of this character, but you said it actually got harder when you did it.
Well, I think it got harder because I was simulating someone who was on a descending scale in terms of his easy breezy relationship to what he was up to and what he had to manage.
And also it's acting, but sometimes your body doesn't know the difference, when you're doing these intense scenes.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that there's truth to that. I hope that I don't have to one day answer for all the sins I've simulated. but yeah, I do think there is some degree, there is some button that presses record, whether you're simulating something or really doing it or ritualizing it or what have you. Yeah.
Well, I actually love how you set up in the first episode, at least, we're rooting for this guy to kill someone. We're like, it's so brilliantly done that, like, we don't want to see Dexter slip because we want to, see him keep his life together. But then again, we don't have a show if he doesn't. So we're actually, and you have a character who is so vile that you just want Dexter to do away with him.
Yeah.
Well, as Michael has said to me before, we start out the first episode, he's living this abstinent monastic life in a town of 2,700 people in upstate New York. But to quote Michael, he said, "But who are we kidding? This is Dexter. Somebody's going to die." And we have to deliver on that, and we have to do it with as much dignity and integrity as we can, storytelling integrity as we can.
Something else that really carries over from the original seasons, you have this amazing ensemble that you've put together. I actually want to start with someone who's come back. You mentioned Jennifer Carpenter. I think it is so brilliant to have her sort of be, Dexter's new new voice of, would reason be the correct word? Can you sort of talk about, the decision, like who that would be? I mean, it seems obvious that's who it should be, but she's just so wonderful in this role.
It needed to be her. Dexter, sorry for the confusion, Michael. Dexter,
happens all the time.
Hedwig,
Yeah.
MC. Early on in the early seasons, I had a voiceover that said, "My sister Deb, if I were capable of loving anyone, it would be her." And so, first of all, it's all the more reason to bring her back. And she grew as such a great character through the first 8 seasons. And to also bring back Jennifer and as Debra, and her aggressiveness, her foul mouth, her take no bullshit from anybody as part of Dexter's conscience. I mean, when we were talking about banging out the show, Michael said, used a great phrase, that the relationship with that corner of his mind should feel like a lived-in marriage, and a well-lived-in marriage, and that's what we strove to do. And in the writing room, I can't tell you how many hundreds of times we had to remind ourselves, wait, Deb isn't real. And even when shooting, we have to say, wait, Dexter can't hold the door open for Deb. She's not real. And it turned out to just be a stroke of absolute luck that she was available. And Michael and Jennifer remained great friends. And to have them on the set together was just joyous. And during a very tough shoot, and Jennifer was in great mood and great spirits and contributed a lot. We were very lucky to have her.
That's all. It must be nice, Michael, for you to have someone who was there from the beginning as well as an actor.
I mean, one of the things that I would snag on or hiccup over when I thought of returning to the show generally over the years leading up to this was about Deb, because as Clyde said, I mean, she was the fundamental touchstone relationship over the course of those first 8 seasons. And without her presence, I thought, well, and I was talking about this with my wife, Morgan. Yes, her name is Morgan. I didn't even think about it for a minute. It was her. She's the one who floated the idea. She was like, well, she can be in the show. She can, just because she's dead doesn't mean she doesn't have to be in the show. What about Harry? And I thought, oh, and anyway, once that idea was alive, it immediately felt essential, and having Jennifer there on set, having Deb there in Dexter's head was a part of what allowed us to feel connected to the fundamentals of the show's DNA, and provided some sort of connective tissue to the old terrain. And it was also, I think, just great for Jennifer to be unbound by whatever obligation the real life Deb created. She, was able to be mercurial and shapeshift and come at me from all different directions. And, it's, he's in a really chaotic place. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry. My ears just did a weird thing. He's in a really chaotic place and is very much at odds with himself internally, and the relationship with Dexter and Deb really went so far to dramatize that instead of just hearing him talk about it in voiceover or what have you.
I love that she's kind of in on the secret now. He had to hide from her for so many years. And now I'm talking about her like she's still a living character, but you know what I mean? That's fun to get to see that. For the new cast, you have these wonderful actors that I'm not terribly familiar with. Julia Jones, who plays Angela, and then Jack Alcott, who plays Harrison, who is now, I guess, 16 years old. These are big shoes to fill. You know, they have to go head to head with Michael. They have to play these very complex, very primary characters. How did you go about rounding out this cast? And specifically, where did you find Jack?
Well, Jack had been in Good Lord Bird for Showtime.
Oh, right.
He played John Brown's youngest son.
Yes. Okay.
And so we had a meeting with him, and then he did a great reading. His reading, what the hell's it called? His screen test was the scene, Michael, where he says, "You went through my stuff," and he just nailed it. And we then met with him virtually because everybody's in different places. In fact, I think we're in 3 different states right now. And he was a godsend. And one of the great things was, because we shot the show so out of order, like we would shoot a scene in Dexter's cabin with Jack in February, and then shoot the scene at the bus station on July 28th, the 2 scenes later. And we had, and Jack was relative to Michael, and was inexperienced. And we see Michael and Jack off to the side talking and working it out, and Michael helping him. And by the time we got to that last scene at the bus station, which was the second to last night of shooting, and all the other cast came by that night. And by the way, it's supposed to be the middle of winter, and it was 84 degrees. And everybody, poor Michael had to wear an overcoat, and Jack had to wear an overcoat. But they became, I believe, very close with each other. And it was, Jack luckily got to go to Michael C. Hall's masterclass and of acting. And by the time we were done and we shot that scene at the bus station, the editor did an assembly of it. And usually goes from the editor to the director to the producer to the network. We never touched it.
Really?
They were so dialed in, and so much father and son, if I may say, by that time, that they knew what they were doing, and we just stayed away. We just got out of the way.
That's really.
Yeah, we got so lucky with Jack. I mean, he's so talented and has really kind of astonishing instincts, and he also looks like he could be Dexter and Rita's kid.
Yeah.
And early on, I had talked to him, but I hadn't met him in person, and he came over to the house I was staying in, and we had both a pool table and a ping pong table downstairs, and we played. Right? Yeah, we played a game of pool. I beat him once, and then he beat me like 3 straight times, and then he beat me in ping pong a couple of times. And I was like, this is so useful, because I think Dexter has this sort of, he looks at Harrison as someone who's better at being a person than he is. And if I was ever struggling for something to think about, I could just think about how much better he is at pool than I am. Yeah, it was great. I mean, he's just, he's a graduate from North Carolina School of the Arts. I mean, he's green in terms of his resume, but he was immediately a pro. He was just up for it, and up for rolling with all the changes and the continuity craziness of shooting 10 episodes all at once. And yeah, it's great.
10 episodes in the cold, no less. You really
in the cold.
This, yeah, in the
heat.
opposite of Miami.
Yeah.
And Jack has this amazing personality and energy. When he's on the set, the whole set's alive because he's so alive. He just turned 25 a couple of days ago, and he's got the energy of a puppy, and he's like racing around, and he's completely athletic and versatile, and he could handle weapons and all the other stuff that we needed him to do. We would send him off to be with other experts, and he'd come in and he'd learn it. He'd learn the stunts and did his own stuff, and he was just amazing.
Did he already have the job when he beat you at pool and ping pong?
Yeah.
Okay, that was okay. I was gonna say I don't know how smart that was. And Julia, Michael, I don't know how involved as a producer you are in the casting, but what's it like to sort of be on the other side of that table and seeing people come in for these roles?
I mean, it's as an actor, it's always eye-opening to sit in and on auditions. I mean, in this case, it was different because it was via Zoom. With Jack, I was in on auditions. With Julia, she was offered the role. I mean, I think she was everyone's sort of prototypical ideal choice, and thankfully she said yes. So meeting with her was I mean, I was definitely on board with that decision, and then I had like a Zoom meeting with her just to say hello, and then met her before we started shooting. But she was just incredibly prepared, and when she came over, she had her sort of Bible of the 10 episodes, and they were notated very specifically, and you know, she's someone who obviously had done all her homework, which was very reassuring, and yeah, I think did a great job bringing like an entire world to her performance, you know. She's obviously within a story that's focused on Dexter and his subjective world, but you really get a sense with her performance as you move through the season of her just bringing an entire world with her.
And Jenelle, in that this is for the PGA, I just want to say that Michael, as an executive producer, is not a vanity title. He's been involved in everything. I see him almost every day, looking at cuts. He was involved in the all through the production and all through post-production as well.
Wow. I mean, I just want to say I'm so grateful to have the show back. I want to remind everyone it's going to be airing on Sunday nights at Showtime, and not just back, but good, you know, because I'm sure you always worry when you have a good track record. You know, we're happy it's back, and I just want to let everyone know how good it is. And I can't wait to see where it goes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You bet. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you too. Thanks for saying that, Clyde.